After clinical death, I overheard my husband's phone conversation and realized that my death was no accident. I pretended to be asleep, and I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I used to think I knew what happiness looked like. For 32 years, it had worn my husband, Gerald's face, the crinkles around his eyes when he smiled, the way he'd hum while making coffee every Sunday morning. We'd raised 3 children in our modest 2-story house in Maple Grove, watched them graduate, marry, move away. Now it was just the 2 of us again, and I'd thought we were entering our golden years together. I was 67 years old, and until 3 months ago, I believed my biggest concern was whether my garden tomatoes would survive the late frost. How naive I was. The first strange thing I noticed was Gerald's sudden interest in our finances. He'd never bothered with the details before. I'd always handled the bills, the investments, the careful management of our retirement savings. But suddenly, he was asking questions. Lots of questions. "Dorothy, honey, remind me again about that life insurance policy. What's the beneficiary arrangement on the house? If something happened to you, how would I access the investment accounts?" I'd laughed it off at first. "Planning to get rid of me, Gerald?" I'd joked. The smile he gave me in return hadn't reached his eyes. Then came the pills. Gerald had started making my morning coffee for me. Such a sweet gesture, I'd thought. How thoughtful of him to let me sleep an extra 15 minutes. But I'd begun feeling increasingly tired, dizzy. My doctor ran tests. Everything came back normal. "Probably just age catching up with you, Dorothy," Dr. Morrison had said with a sympathetic pat on my shoulder. But I wasn't convinced. I was tired, yes. But this was different. This was a fog that wouldn't lift, a heaviness in my limbs that made even simple tasks exhausting. And Gerald seemed almost pleased by my decline. Did I imagine the satisfaction in his eyes when I needed to steady myself against the kitchen counter? Was it my paranoia when I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher? The day it happened started like any other Wednesday. Gerald made coffee. I drank it, ignoring the slightly bitter aftertaste I'd grown accustomed to. By noon, I felt worse than ever. My heart was racing, then slowing, then racing again. The room spun. I called out for Gerald, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. I remember collapsing in the hallway. I remember the ceiling tiles blurring above me. I remember thinking, with crystal clarity, this is it. This is how I die. And then, nothing. They told me later that I'd been clinically dead for 4 minutes. 4 minutes where my heart had stopped, where I'd been somewhere between this world and whatever comes next. The paramedics had revived me, rushed me to Mercy General Hospital. A miracle, everyone said. 67 years old and you survive cardiac arrest? God must have plans for you, Dorothy. If only they knew. I woke up in the ICU. Tubes and wires connecting me to machines that beeped and hummed. My throat was raw from the breathing tube they'd removed. My chest ached. But I was alive. Somehow, impossibly, I was alive. And that's when I heard them. Gerald was in the hallway just outside my room. I could see his shadow through the frosted glass partition, could hear his voice. Low, urgent, angry. He was on his phone. "How the hell did this happen?" he hissed. "You said the dose would work. You promised me it would look natural." My blood ran cold. A woman's voice responded. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was placating, defensive. "Well, she's not dead, Linda. She's very much alive, and now we have a problem." Gerald's voice cracked with barely contained fury. "The doctors will run more tests. What if they find something?" Linda Sorensen. My mind raced. Our neighbor, the woman who'd been so helpful these past months, bringing casseroles, offering to drive me to appointments when Gerald was too busy? The woman who was a nurse at this very hospital? We'll have to find another way, Gerald continued. We've come too far to back out now. Once she's gone, we can finally be together. The house, the money, all of it will be ours. I felt bile rise in my throat, but I forced myself to remain absolutely still. My heart monitor betrayed nothing but a steady, living rhythm. Gerald was still talking. I'll go back in. I'll play the devoted husband. Just figure something out. And for God's sake, be more careful this time. The footsteps approached. I closed my eyes, regulated my breathing, let my face go slack. The door opened. I felt Gerald take my hand, his touch now repulsive, poisonous. "Oh, Dorothy," he murmured, his voice thick with false emotion. "Please wake up. I can't lose you." Liar, I thought. Murderer. But I kept my eyes closed. I kept breathing slowly, evenly. And I began to plan. I pretended to sleep for another hour while Gerald sat beside my bed, occasionally sighing dramatically for the benefit of passing nurses. Every touch of his hand made my skin crawl. This man I'd shared a bed with for 3 decades, who'd held our children when they were born, who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health. This man had tried to kill me. The question that burned through my mind wasn't why. I'd heard enough. Money. Linda. A fresh start with a younger woman. She was only 53, 14 years my junior. No. The question was, what was I going to do about it? When Gerald finally left, claiming he needed to grab some dinner and check on the house, I opened my eyes. A nurse came in almost immediately, her face lighting up with relief. "Mrs. Patterson, you're awake. How are you feeling?" "Tired," I managed, my voice hoarse. Confused. What happened? She explained the cardiac arrest, the successful resuscitation, the ongoing monitoring. I played the role of the bewildered patient perfectly. Inside, my mind was cataloging every detail, every possibility. I had to be smart. Gerald and Linda had already tried once. If they suspected I knew, they might try again, and this time, they might succeed. I was in a hospital, yes, but Linda worked here. She had access to medications, to my IV lines, to countless ways of finishing what they'd started. The white walls that should have felt safe suddenly seemed like a trap. Over the next 2 days, I took careful stock of my situation. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with my heart. Perhaps a severe reaction to stress, they suggested, or an undiagnosed arrhythmia that corrected itself. They wanted to keep me for observation, run more tests. I agreed to everything, playing the compliant patient while my mind worked furiously. My assets. I was still alive. They didn't know I knew. I had a sharp mind despite what Gerald had been doing to me, and now that he'd stopped putting whatever he'd been putting in my coffee, the fog was already beginning to lift. I had 3 grown children who loved me, though they lived in different states. I had friends, neighbors who'd known me for years. My vulnerabilities. I was physically weak. I was legally married to my would-be murderer, which gave him access to everything: my home, my finances, my medical decisions. I had no concrete proof of what I'd heard. Who would believe that sweet Gerald Patterson, pillar of the community, retired accountant, volunteer at the church food bank, was trying to murder his wife? And Linda was clever. She'd know how to make another attempt look natural. An accidental overdose of medication? A fall? How many ways were there to kill an elderly woman and make it look like simple misfortune? I needed evidence. I needed protection. And I needed to plan every move with absolute precision, because one mistake could be my last. The first step came to me during the night shift, when a different nurse checked my vitals. I recognized her, Marcy Chen, whose daughter had been in the same Girl Scout troop as my youngest, Emma. We'd carpooled to meetings for years. "Marcy," I said softly when she finished checking my IV. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, Mrs. Patterson." "Is Linda Sorensen working this week? Linda from next door? She told me she works here, and I'd love to see a friendly face." Marcy's expression shifted slightly. Was that discomfort? "Linda is on staff, yes. She's been asking about you, actually. Wanted to know your room number, but—" She hesitated. "But she's not assigned to this floor." "Oh," I said innocently. "That's too bad." After Marcy left, I felt a cold satisfaction. Linda had been asking about me, trying to get access, which meant she and Gerald were already planning their next move. I had to move faster. The next morning, when Gerald arrived with flowers and concern etched on his lying face, I was ready with my performance. I smiled weakly at him, reached for his hand. "Gerald, I've been thinking, when I get out of here, maybe we should update our wills. This whole thing made me realize we haven't reviewed them in years." Something flickered in his eyes. Alarm? Interest? That's very practical of you, dear. But let's focus on getting you better first." "Of course," I murmured. "But promise me we'll do it soon. I just want everything to be in order, for the children." "I promise," he said, squeezing my hand. Liar, I thought again. But I squeezed back and let my eyes drift closed, as if exhausted. I'd planted the seed. Now I needed to make some calls. Private calls. And I knew exactly who to contact first. My daughter, Emma, the lawyer, who'd always been the most sharp-eyed of my children. She'd know something was wrong the moment she heard my voice. She'd come. And then Gerald and Linda would discover that killing Dorothy Patterson wasn't going to be nearly as easy as they'd thought. They discharged me on Friday afternoon. Gerald picked me up with that solicitous smile I now recognized as a mask. He'd brought a pillow for the car ride, helped me into the passenger seat as if I were made of glass. "We'll get you home and tucked into bed," he cooed. "I've made soup." "I'll bet you have," I thought. With a special ingredient, no doubt. But I'd been busy during my hospital stay. Emma had come the day before, and the conversation we'd had, brief, whispered, and carefully coded in case Gerald returned unexpectedly, had set everything in motion. My daughter had inherited my practical nature and her father's analytical mind. When I'd told her I needed her to do something for me without asking questions yet, she'd seen something in my eyes that made her nod immediately. "I'm taking a leave from work," Emma had announced to Gerald when he'd arrived during her visit. "Mom needs help recovering, and I can work remotely from here for a few weeks." The look on Gerald's face had been priceless. A flash of pure panic before he'd managed to rearrange his features into gratitude. "That's so generous of you, honey. But I can manage." "Dad, you've been under so much stress. Let me help." Emma's voice had been firm, brooking no argument. "I've already booked a hotel room nearby. I'll come by every day." Not staying in the house, Emma was smart, but close enough to keep watch. Close enough to be a witness. Now, as Gerald drove us home, I watched his hands grip the steering wheel a little too tightly. He was adjusting his plans, I could tell. Linda must have been furious when she heard. Their window of opportunity was narrowing. The house looked the same as always. The blue shutters I'd painted myself 5 years ago, the rose bushes that needed pruning, the welcome mat that said, "Home, sweet home." But now it felt like enemy territory. Every corner could hide a threat. Every meal could be my last. "I'll help you upstairs," Gerald said. "You should rest." Actually, I think I'd prefer the guest room on the first floor, I said. The stairs feel too much right now. Another flash of displeasure. The first floor guest room had windows facing the street, easier for Emma to monitor, harder for midnight accidents. Whatever you think is best, dear. He settled me in, brought me water and pills. Your heart medication, he said. Doctor's orders. I took the pills from his hand, pretended to swallow them with water, and held them under my tongue until he left. The moment the door closed, I spat them into a tissue and tucked it into the drawer of the nightstand. Emma would have them tested. Over the next few days, I established a routine. I appeared weak, compliant, grateful for Gerald's care. I ate very little of what he prepared, claiming nausea. I poured coffee down the sink when he wasn't looking. I took nothing he gave me. And slowly, gradually, I felt my strength returning as whatever he'd been poisoning me with worked its way out of my system. Emma came every day, and Gerald couldn't refuse her presence without raising suspicion. We were careful. She played the devoted daughter, and I played the recovering invalid. But every time she took my trash, she was collecting evidence. Every conversation we had was building a case. Then came the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. Linda showed up on Tuesday morning. Gerald had left for the grocery store, or so he said, and I heard the doorbell. From the guest room, I watched through a crack in the door as Gerald let her in. They didn't know I could see the mirror in the hallway, which reflected the kitchen perfectly. "She's getting stronger," Linda said, her voice tight with anxiety. She looked haggard, dark circles under her eyes. People at the hospital are talking. Why would a perfectly healthy woman have sudden cardiac arrest? What if they run more comprehensive toxicology? They won't, Gerald said. The tests they ran showed nothing. Because I used... Linda stopped, lowered her voice. But I could still hear. The house had excellent acoustics, something I'd always loved. Because I used compounds that metabolize quickly. But Gerald, if we try again and it fails, if there's another incident, they'll look closer. They'll exhume. They'll find evidence of the previous attempts. Previous attempts? Plural. How long had they been doing this? Months? The coffee? The dizziness? The fatigue I'd attributed to aging. It had all been them, slowly killing me. I pulled out my phone. The new one Emma had bought me, with a recording app already open. I'd been recording every moment since I got home, hours and hours of mundane conversation. But now, we can't wait much longer, Gerald was saying. She wants to update the will. What if she changes it, writes the kids in for everything? Then we need to act this week, Linda said, before the daughter leaves. Make it look like she fell, hit her head. Head trauma from the cardiac event. It's believable. Wednesday night, Gerald said. Emma won't be here. She mentioned a work meeting she has to take remotely from the hotel. It'll just be me and Dorothy. My hand trembled as I held the phone. Wednesday night. 2 days from now. They were planning to murder me in 2 days. But now I had them. Their words, recorded clearly, discussing not just their affair but their specific plan to kill me. This wasn't paranoia or misheard whispers. This was evidence. When Linda left and Gerald checked on me, I was lying in bed, eyes closed, breathing steadily. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. I could feel his eyes on me, calculating, planning. Soon, he whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear it. Just a little longer, Dorothy. He closed the door. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding. But not from fear, from fury, from determination. I had 2 days to finish preparing. 2 days to turn the hunters into the hunted, and with Emma's help, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Gerald wanted to bury me. Instead, I was going to bury him. That Tuesday evening, Emma came for what appeared to be a routine visit. Gerald was in the living room watching television. Emma helped me to the bathroom, a perfect cover for a private conversation. "I have it," I whispered, showing her the phone with the recording. "They're planning to kill me Wednesday night." Emma's face went pale, then hardened. My daughter had her father's coloring, but none of his weakness. "We're going to the police. Now." "Not yet," I said. "They need to actually attempt it. Otherwise, a good lawyer could argue it's just talk, fantasy, venting frustration." "Mom, are you insane? They're planning to murder you." "And I'm planning to let them try, with police present to stop them. Emma, trust me. We need incontrovertible evidence, but first, we need protection. Can you get a restraining order filed tomorrow morning, against Linda at least? Some pretext, say she's been harassing me, making me uncomfortable." Emma stared at me. "You want to use yourself as bait?" "I want to make sure they can never try this again. With anyone." We set it in motion the next morning. Emma filed for the restraining order, citing Linda's inappropriate behavior, her stalking, her attempts to access my hospital room. It was a thin pretext, but it would create a legal paper trail. More importantly, it would rattle them. Linda received the order by noon. I knew because my phone rang 30 minutes later, Gerald's cell. But it wasn't Gerald's voice when I answered. "You bitch," Linda hissed. "You think you can ruin this for us? You have no idea what we're capable of." My heart raced, but my voice stayed steady. "I don't know what you're talking about, Linda. I filed that order because you've been making me uncomfortable. A woman has a right to boundaries." "Boundaries? After everything Gerald and I—" She caught herself, but too late. I was recording again. "You're not going to win this, Dorothy. You're a sick old woman. Anything could happen to you." "Is that a threat, Linda?" "It's a promise. Wednesday night, the way you've been deteriorating. Tragic, really, but natural. Who would question it?" She hung up. I sat there, shaking now, but not from fear, from adrenaline. She'd just threatened me directly. More evidence for the recording. Gerald came home an hour later, his face thunderous. He slammed through the door, and I flinched, genuinely frightened by the rage I saw there. This was a side of him I'd never witnessed in 32 years. "What the hell did you do?" he roared, storming into the guest room. "A restraining order? Against Linda?" I pressed myself back against the headboard. "She was scaring me, Gerald. The way she kept trying to see me at the hospital." "Scaring you? She's your friend. She's been helping us." "Helping you, maybe." The words came out before I could stop them. I saw his expression shift, saw the realization dawn that I might know more than I was letting on. He stepped closer, and for the first time, I saw actual violence in his eyes. "What exactly do you think you know, Dorothy?" "I don't know anything," I said quickly. "I just felt uncomfortable with how pushy Linda was being, that's all." "That's all?" He grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. "You're lying. You've been acting strange since you came home. What did you hear at the hospital?" "Nothing. Gerald, you're hurting me. Tell me the truth." His hand tightened. "Did you hear me on the phone? Were you awake?" For a moment, we stared at each other. The mask was fully off now. This was the real Gerald, the man who'd been slowly poisoning me for months, who was sleeping with our neighbor, who'd planned my murder in cold blood. "Emma!" I screamed. "Emma, help!" She burst through the front door. She'd been waiting outside as we'd planned. The sight of her father gripping my wrist, his face contorted with rage, stopped her cold. "Dad, what are you doing?" Gerald released me as if burned. She was confused, disoriented. I was just trying to calm her down. "By grabbing her, I can see the marks from here." Emma pulled out her phone and took pictures of the red marks forming on my wrist. Gerald's face cycled through emotions, rage, panic, calculation. He settled on injured innocence. This is insane. Dorothy filed a baseless restraining order, and now she's making me look like the bad guy? I've done nothing but take care of her. Get out, Emma said coldly. Get out of this house right now, or I'm calling the police. This is my house. And that's my mother you just assaulted. Out. Now. Gerald looked between us, and I saw the moment he decided to retreat. This wasn't going according to his plan. He needed time to regroup, to strategize with Linda. Fine. I'll go stay at a hotel. But this isn't over, Dorothy. We're going to have a long talk about your mental state and whether you're competent to make your own decisions. The threat was clear. He'd try to have me declared incompetent, take control of my assets that way. But it was also a tactical error. He was threatening me in front of a witness, showing his true colors. After he left, I collapsed onto the bed, genuinely exhausted now. Emma sat beside me, her hand gentle where Gerald's had been cruel. We're calling the police, she said. Tonight. This has gone far enough. Tomorrow, I said. Let me rest tonight. One night to recover my strength, then we end this. She didn't like it, but she agreed. She stayed with me that night, sleeping on the chair beside my bed. And for the first time in months, I slept soundly, knowing I was protected. Gerald and Linda had shown their hand. Now it was time to show them mine. For 3 days, I rested. Emma stayed close, working from my house now, sleeping in the guest room upstairs. We kept the doors locked, windows secured. Gerald called repeatedly, but I didn't answer. Let him stew. Let him and Linda panic and make mistakes. On Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Emma checked through the window and frowned. It's Linda. Should I send her away? No, I said. Let her in, but stay in the room. I want you to hear this. Linda looked terrible. Her hair unwashed, makeup hastily applied to cover dark circles. She carried a casserole dish and wore a pleading expression. Dorothy, please, can we talk? I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I gestured to the chair across from me. Emma stood by the door, arms crossed. Linda glanced at her nervously but sat down. I know the restraining order probably seemed extreme, I began, my voice carefully weak and uncertain. But Linda, you were so insistent at the hospital. It frightened me. I was just worried about you. You're my friend, my neighbor. When Gerald called to tell me you'd had cardiac arrest, I was devastated. She leaned forward, taking my hand. I let her, though my skin crawled at her touch. Dorothy, I care about you. About both of you. Do you? I asked quietly. Something flickered in her eyes. Of course I do. Gerald and we're close, yes. He's been so stressed caring for you, and I've tried to support him through this difficult time, as a friend. Nothing more. Interesting, I said, because Gerald implied there was something more. He was quite angry about the restraining order. He said you'd been helping him, specifically. Linda's face went carefully blank. He was probably just upset that I'd been trying to help with your care. Men can be territorial about their wives, you know. Can they? I tilted my head. Even when they're sleeping with the neighbor? The room went utterly silent. Linda's face drained of color. I don't know what you... Please don't insult my intelligence, I said, and my voice was no longer weak. It was steel. I know about you and Gerald. I've known for a while now. She recovered quickly. I had to give her credit. If you know, then you know we love each other. Gerald has been unhappy for years, Dorothy. He's been too kind to say it, but what? He'd rather murder me than divorce me? I let the words hang in the air. Murder? Dorothy, you're being paranoid. Your illness has affected your thinking. My illness that conveniently struck right when you and Gerald wanted to be together? The illness that doctors can't explain? Tell me, Linda, what did you put in my coffee? She stood abruptly. I'm not listening to this. You're clearly delusional. Gerald's right. You need psychiatric help. Then why are you here? Emma asked from her position by the door. If Mom's just crazy, why come to placate her? Why not let the restraining order stand and be done with it? Linda's eyes darted between us. She was cornered and knew it. I came because I care. Because despite what Dorothy apparently thinks, I'm a good person who's made a mistake. Yes, Gerald and I developed feelings for each other. It was wrong, and I'm sorry. But we would never. Never what? I asked. Never planned to kill me so you could have my husband and my money? This is insane. Linda moved toward the door, but Emma didn't budge. Let me out. In a moment, Emma said. First, I want you to know that we have recordings of phone conversations, of visits, of threats. We have documentation of Mom's suspicious illness. We have evidence of Dad trying to access Mom's assets, and we're taking all of it to the police on Monday. Linda's mask finally cracked. The pleasant neighbor disappeared, replaced by something cold and venomous. You have nothing. Some recordings that could be interpreted a dozen ways. Circumstantial evidence at best. Meanwhile, Dorothy is clearly mentally unstable, filing baseless restraining orders, making wild accusations. Any lawyer worth their salt will shred your case. Perhaps, I said. But here's what else will happen. The recordings will be leaked. The whole neighborhood will hear them. Your nursing license will be investigated. Gerald's reputation will be destroyed. Even if we can't prove attempted murder, we can prove the affair, the financial manipulation, the attempts to have me declared incompetent. Is that really what you want? I was bluffing, partially. We couldn't leak the recordings without compromising our legal case. But Linda didn't know that. She stared at me with pure hatred. You vindictive old bitch. No, I said calmly. Just a woman who refuses to die for your convenience. Now get out of my house. After she left, I started shaking. Emma knelt beside me, holding my hands. Mom, that was incredible. You were so strong. I don't feel strong, I admitted. I feel terrified. They're going to retaliate. Let them try. We're documenting everything. But I needed more than documentation. I needed people. Over the next 2 days, I made calls. To my son Michael in Seattle. To my daughter Sarah in Boston. I told them everything. They were shocked, horrified, and immediately supportive. I called my sister Patricia in Florida. She'd never liked Gerald, had always said there was something off about him. She was on a plane within hours. I called my pastor, Reverend Matthews, and confided in him. He promised to be there for whatever I needed. I called old friends, people I'd known for decades, who remembered Gerald and me when we were young and in love. I didn't ask them to believe me. I just told them the truth and let them draw their own conclusions. By Sunday evening, I wasn't alone anymore. I was surrounded by people who loved me, who would stand as witnesses to whatever came next. Gerald and Linda had each other in their secrets. I had a community, and that made all the difference. Gerald returned on Monday morning. I was sitting in the living room with Patricia and Emma when he walked through the front door. He still had his key, of course. He stopped short when he saw the three of us, then arranged his face into a sorrowful expression. Dorothy, please, can we talk? Just the two of us? Anything you have to say can be said in front of my sister and daughter, I replied. He sighed, a long, suffering sound. Fine. I came to apologize. I was wrong to grab you the other day. The stress of everything, your illness, the accusations, Linda. It got to me. But I love you, Dorothy. I've always loved you. How touching, Patricia said dryly. She'd never been one to mince words. Gerald ignored her, focusing on me. I know you think something is going on between Linda and me, and I'll admit, we got too close. She was someone to talk to when you were sick, and it became inappropriate. But Dorothy, I swear to you, it never went beyond emotional support. You're lying, I said simply. I'm not. You called her from the hospital. I heard you. You said once she's gone, we can finally be together. The house, the money, all of it will be ours. Those were your exact words, Gerald. His face went white. You were unconscious. You couldn't have. I was clinically dead. But I came back, and I heard everything. We stared at each other across the living room. Finally, Gerald sat down heavily on the couch. Okay, yes. Linda and I are together. But Dorothy, we never tried to hurt you. Your cardiac arrest was natural. The stress of suspecting us, maybe, but natural. And the coffee, the pills, the months of fatigue and dizziness? You're elderly. These things happen. I'm 67, not 90. And I was perfectly healthy until 6 months ago. Coincidentally, right when you started making my morning coffee. Gerald's jaw tightened. I watched him calculating, trying to find the right angle. Even if, hypothetically, something was in your coffee, you have no proof. You drank it all. There's nothing to test. Actually, Emma said, we have the pills you gave Mom after she came home from the hospital. The ones you said were heart medication. We had them tested. They weren't heart medication at all. They were a combination of benzodiazepines and beta blockers in doses that could cause exactly the symptoms Mom experienced. This was partially a bluff. We'd only just sent the pills to a private lab, results pending, but Gerald's reaction told us everything. His face crumpled. No, you're lying. We also have recordings, I continued, of you and Linda discussing how to kill me, discussing previous attempts, discussing Wednesday night's planned accident. Gerald stood abruptly. The sorrowful mask was gone. What remained was something I barely recognized, something desperate and dangerous. You can't use those recordings. They were made without my knowledge. They're inadmissible. In criminal court, perhaps. In the court of public opinion. In divorce proceedings. I think they'll be quite illuminating. Divorce? He laughed, but it was a wild sound. You think I'll agree to a divorce that leaves me with nothing after 32 years? I think you'll agree to whatever keeps you out of prison. You can't prove attempted murder. You can't prove anything. Maybe not beyond reasonable doubt, Patricia interjected, but we can certainly create enough doubt about your character to make your life very difficult. Every neighbor, every friend, every church member will hear those recordings. Every potential employer will know you as the man who cheated on his dying wife. And Linda, her nursing license will be revoked before she can say Hippocratic oath. Gerald's hands clenched into fists. You would destroy both our lives over hurt feelings? Over a marriage that was already dead? You tried to kill me. The words exploded from me. You poisoned me for months. You planned to stage my death, and now you want me to just accept it? To quietly go away? It would have been easier for everyone, he said, and the honesty in his voice was chilling. You would have just gone to sleep, Dorothy. No pain, no suffering, just peace. And I could have moved on. We could have moved on. The room fell silent. Even Gerald seemed to realize he'd said too much, revealed too much of his true self. Get out, I said quietly. Get out of this house. We're going to the police this afternoon. You have until then to get a lawyer. This is my house, too. Not anymore, Emma said. Mom's filing for divorce this morning. Emergency orders citing domestic violence. We have the photos of the bruises. You're barred from this property pending the hearing. Gerald looked at each of us in turn. I saw the exact moment when his fear turned to rage. You think you're so clever, all of you. But you're making a mistake. Linda and I, we're not going down without a fight. We'll tell everyone you're senile, delusional. We'll present evidence of your mental decline. By the time we're done, you'll be the one who looks unstable. Then do it, I said. My voice was steady despite the fear coursing through me. Go ahead and try. Because, Gerald, here's what you don't understand. I'm not afraid of you anymore. I died. I literally died and I came back. Nothing you can do to me now is worse than what you've already tried." He stared at me, and I saw something collapse behind his eyes. He turned and walked to the door, then paused. "I did love you once, Dorothy, before you became this bitter, suspicious old woman. Maybe I should have just left. Maybe I should have been the bigger person." "Maybe you should have," I agreed. "But you weren't. And now we both have to live with the consequences." After he left, I sat very still. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. Patricia put her arm around me while Emma locked all the doors, drew all the curtains. "Mom," Emma said softly, "we're going to the police now, today. No more waiting." I nodded. The fear was still there, cold in my belly. But underneath it was something stronger. A burning determination. Gerald and Linda had tried to erase me, to dispose of me like I was nothing. They were about to learn just how wrong they'd been. I was Dorothy Patterson. I'd raised 3 children, built a home, survived 67 years in this world. And I wasn't going anywhere, not without a fight. The police station was busy on Monday afternoon. Detective Sarah Morrison took our statement in a small room that smelled of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We presented everything: the recordings, the pills, the documented timeline of my illness, the threats, the bruises. Emma had organized it all into a neat folder, chronological and damning. Detective Morrison listened without interrupting. When we finished, she sat back. "Mrs. Patterson, this is comprehensive. I'll need to verify the authenticity of these recordings and get the lab results on those pills. But if everything checks out, we have enough for arrest warrants." "How long?" Emma asked. 48 hours, maybe less. We'll need to move carefully. Conspiracy to commit murder is serious, and we need the case airtight." That night, I stayed with Patricia at her hotel. We didn't trust that Gerald wouldn't try something desperate. Emma stationed herself at my house, armed with mace and the police on speed dial. The call came at 11 p.m. Detective Morrison's voice was tight with controlled urgency. "Mrs. Patterson, we have a situation. Linda Sorensen just came to the station. She wants to talk." My heart leaped. "About what?" "She says she wants to make a deal. She'll testify against Gerald in exchange for immunity." Patricia grabbed my hand as I processed this. "She's turning on him? Looks like it. Her lawyer's with her. They're claiming Gerald coerced her, that she was a victim of his manipulation. She's willing to detail everything, the poisoning, the planning, all of it." "But Mrs. Patterson, I need you to come down here. There are some questions only you can answer, and we need to record an official statement while the evidence is fresh." I was back at the station within 30 minutes. Patricia and Emma flanked me as Detective Morrison led us to an observation room. Through the one-way glass, I could see Linda sitting with her lawyer, looking small and frightened. "She doesn't look like a murderer," Patricia murmured. "They never do," Detective Morrison replied. We watched as another detective questioned Linda. She was crying, dabbing at her eyes with tissue. "I never wanted any of this," she sobbed. "Gerald told me Dorothy was dying anyway, that the doctors had given her months at most. He said it would be mercy, that she was suffering." My jaw dropped. "That's a complete lie. I was perfectly healthy." "We know," Detective Morrison said. "Let her talk. Let her dig her own grave." Linda continued. "He said if I helped him, we could be together, that he loved me. But then Dorothy survived, and Gerald got angry. He said I'd messed up the dosage, that I was incompetent. He threatened to tell everyone it was all my idea if I didn't help him try again." "So it was Gerald's plan all along?" the detective in the room asked. "Yes, all of it. I was lonely and stupid and I let him manipulate me. I felt Patricia's hand tighten on mine. She's putting it all on him. Smart, Emma said bitterly. If she claims coercion, claims she was afraid of him, she might actually avoid jail time. But then the interrogation room door burst open. Gerald stormed in, his lawyer trailing behind him, shouting about procedure and rights. "You lying bitch!" Gerald screamed at Linda. "You're trying to frame me?" Linda shrank back, but her lawyer stood. "Mr. Patterson, you need to leave." "Like hell I do. She's the nurse. She's the one with access to medications. She's the one who knew what doses would work. I never asked her to hurt Dorothy." "You called me from the hospital," Linda shrieked. "You said we had a problem, that we needed to find another way. You're the one who wanted her dead." "For the insurance? For the house? You're the one who brought it up. You're the one who said we could be set for life if—" Both their lawyers were shouting now. Security rushed in. But the damage was done. In their panic, in their desperation to blame each other, Gerald and Linda had confessed to everything, on camera, with witnesses. Detective Morrison turned to me with something like awe. "Mrs. Patterson, they just handed us the case." I sat down heavily, my legs suddenly weak. It was over. They'd destroyed each other. The next hour was a blur of official statements, signing documents, watching as both Gerald and Linda were formally arrested. Gerald's face when he was led past our observation room, the hatred in his eyes, would haunt me for months. But it no longer frightened me. "Mrs. Patterson," Detective Morrison said as we prepared to leave, "I have to ask, did you know Linda would crack? That she'd turn on him?" "I hoped," I admitted. "I know Linda. She's always been weak, always followed the strongest personality in the room. Once she realized I wasn't going to die quietly, that there would be consequences, I gambled she'd try to save herself." "And Gerald?" "I knew he'd be too arrogant to stay quiet, too convinced of his own innocence. He'd want to defend himself, to explain how it wasn't really his fault." I looked through the glass at my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, slumped in his chair, his life in ruins. "I was married to him for 32 years. I know exactly how he thinks." Emma hugged me tight. "Mom, you did it. You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected. "But yes, we had. The woman Gerald and Linda tried to kill, the sick, weak, dying woman they'd dismissed and discarded. She'd outmaneuvered them both. And now they would spend years, possibly decades, paying for what they'd done. Justice, I thought, was a cold comfort. But it was comfort, nonetheless. The trial took 8 months to reach its conclusion. 8 months of testimony, evidence presentation, expert witnesses. 8 months of watching Gerald and Linda destroy what remained of their credibility on the stand. Linda's immunity deal fell apart within weeks. The prosecution discovered she'd been planning this long before Gerald entered the picture. She'd researched digitalis compounds 2 years ago, had made suspicious purchases of pharmaceutical supplies. She wasn't a manipulated victim, she was an active conspirator. Perhaps even the instigator. Both their lawyers tried every trick. They claimed I was vengeful, fabricating evidence. They claimed the recordings were edited. They brought in psychologists to testify about my supposed mental decline. They even tried to argue that my cardiac arrest was a natural event that I'd twisted into a murder conspiracy to punish an unfaithful husband. But the evidence was overwhelming. The pills Gerald gave me tested positive for a cocktail of drugs that should never be combined. Drugs that would indeed cause cardiac arrhythmia in a woman my age. Investigators found traces of digitalis in my hair follicles, proving months of poisoning. They found searches on Linda's computer. Untraceable poisons. Natural-looking heart attacks. Inheriting spouse's estate. Gerald's financial records revealed he'd been siphoning money from our accounts for over a year, preparing for a life after my death. He'd taken out an additional life insurance policy on me 6 months before my cardiac arrest, one I'd never known about, with his forged signature on my behalf. That alone was a felony. The most damning evidence came from Linda's own records. She'd kept notes, detailed, meticulous notes about dosages, timing, expected effects. Apparently, she fancied herself a scientist, documenting her experiment. Those notes became Exhibit A in proving premeditated attempted murder. I attended every day of the trial. I sat in the front row and watched Gerald and Linda squirm under cross-examination. I watched Gerald's face turn red as the prosecutor detailed his affair, his greed, his utter disregard for the woman he'd promised to love until death. I watched Linda cry, real tears this time, as she realized no jury would believe her victim act. My children surrounded me throughout. Michael flew in from Seattle. Sarah from Boston. Emma never left my side. They testified about their father's strange behavior, about Linda's inappropriate presence in our lives. They testified about the mother I'd been before the poisoning, active, healthy, vibrant, and the shell I'd become. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman's voice was steady. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Gerald Patterson, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Linda Sorensen, guilty. There were more charges: fraud, forgery, attempted murder, assault. The guilty verdicts kept coming, one after another, until Gerald sat with his head in his hands and Linda stared blankly ahead. The sentencing hearing was 3 weeks later. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s, Judge Catherine Brennan, who'd heard too many cases of domestic violence masked as love. "Mr. Patterson," she said, looking down at Gerald with cold contempt, "you took the trust of a 32-year marriage and weaponized it. You used your wife's love against her, poisoning her slowly while she still believed in you. You planned to attend her funeral and collect insurance money on a murder you committed. The callousness of your actions is staggering." Gerald's lawyer tried to argue for leniency. Gerald had no prior record. He was a respected member of the community. He'd already lost everything: his reputation, his marriage, his children's respect. Judge Brennan wasn't moved. 25 years in state prison. No possibility of parole for 20 years. Gerald's face crumpled. 25 years, he was 69 now. He'd be 94 if he lived long enough to be released. Essentially, a life sentence. Linda's sentencing was equally harsh. "Ms. Sorensen, you violated your oath as a nurse. You used your medical knowledge not to heal, but to harm. You preyed on a vulnerable patient for personal gain. 20 years in state prison. Your nursing license is permanently revoked." I watched them led away in handcuffs, and I felt empty. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just tired. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I made a brief statement, Emma at my side. "I want to thank the district attorney's office, Detective Morrison, and everyone who believed me when it would have been easier to dismiss me as a confused elderly woman. What happened to me happens to countless others. Spouses, family members, vulnerable people targeted by those who should protect them. If my story can help even one person recognize the signs, speak up, fight back, then something good came from this nightmare." The divorce was finalized a week later. The house was mine. The retirement accounts were mine. Everything Gerald had tried to steal, I kept. He'd signed over everything in a desperate attempt to reduce his sentence. It hadn't worked. I stood in my house, looking at the pictures on the wall. 32 years of memories, now tainted. I began taking them down, one by one. The wedding photo, the children's birthdays, family vacations. All of it went into boxes. Patricia found me sitting in the middle of the living room, surrounded by boxed-up history. "What are you going to do now?" she asked gently. I looked up at her and smiled. A real smile. the first in months. Live, I said simply. I'm going to live. 2 years later, I stood in the garden of my new home, a charming cottage in Asheville, North Carolina, 2 hours from Sarah and her family. The mountains rose in the distance, purple and eternal. My hands were deep in soil, planting heirloom tomatoes. The old house had sold quickly. I'd walked away from Maple Grove without looking back. Emma had helped me choose this place, smaller, manageable, with a sunroom perfect for painting. Yes, painting. At 69, I'd discovered I had a talent for watercolors. My life now was full in ways it had never been during my marriage. I volunteered at the community center, teaching other seniors how to recognize financial abuse. I'd become a voice for elder justice, speaking at conferences, sharing my story. My children visited often. Emma had moved to Asheville, too, working in elder law. We had dinner together twice a week. I'd even started dating. A retired teacher named Robert who made me laugh and never tried to control what I ate or drank. Life, I discovered, could begin at 69. Meanwhile, Gerald was in Riverbend State Prison. None of his old friends visited. His children had stopped accepting his calls after hearing nothing but bitterness and blame. He'd aged terribly, gained 50 pounds, developed diabetes and arthritis. The very conditions he'd tried to give me through poisoning were now his own prison. Linda's fate was perhaps worse. She'd been sent to a women's correctional facility where inmates treated those who hurt others in medical settings with particular brutality. She'd been in protective custody twice. Her ex-husband had divorced her immediately, taking their children and moving to Oregon. The children were told their mother was dead. Her nursing license revocation had made national news in medical ethics circles. She'd become a cautionary tale in nursing schools. Both she and Gerald had filed multiple appeals, all denied. The money ran out quickly. Legal fees had devoured everything. I should have felt satisfied by their suffering, but mostly I felt pity. They'd destroyed their lives for nothing. Meanwhile, I woke every morning in my sunny cottage, made coffee without fear, and planned my day. I painted, I gardened, I laughed with friends, I held my grandchildren. I'd survived. More than that, I'd thrived. One afternoon, I received a letter from Gerald. Prison mail. I held it for a long moment, then dropped it, unopened, into the fireplace. I watched it burn. Whatever he had to say, I didn't need to hear it. That chapter was closed. I went outside to my garden, where Robert was waiting with fresh strawberries and a smile. The sun was warm. The mountains were beautiful. Life was good. And I had fought for every bit of it. Thank you for listening to mine. Stay safe, stay strong, and remember, it's never too late to fight back.